This episode is supported by FX's Grotesquerie, a new series from executive producer Ryan Murphy. Heinous crimes unsettle a small community, and the local detective feels these atrocities are eerily personal, as if someone or something is taunting her. Starring Niecy Nash Betts, Courtney B. Vance, Leslie Manville, and Travis Kelsey, FX's Grotesquerie premieres September 25th on FX. Stream on Hulu.
This episode is brought to you by The Walking Dead: The Ones Who Live. The Ones Who Live presents the epic love story of two iconic characters changed by a changed world. Kept apart by distance, by an unimaginable power, and by the ghosts of who they once were. Rick, Andrew Lincoln, and Michonne, Denai Guerrera, are thrown into a dangerous new land, built on a war against the dead, and ultimately, a war against the living. Despite new threats unlike they've ever seen, Rick and Michonne will stop at nothing to find each other, and together, fight their way home. The Walking Dead: The Ones Who Live is now available on DVD and limited edition Steelbook.
Your teen requested a ride, but this time not from you. It's through their Uber teen account. You drive your teenager around, a lot, to their friend Jacob's house, their other friend Jake's house, to James's, to Jaden's, to Jalen's, to...
Mom? This is Jake's house, not Jacob's.
Now with an Uber teen account, your teen can request a ride under your supervision. They'll ride with a highly rated driver, and with live trip tracking, you'll follow along the whole ride to their friends' houses that all sound the same. Add your teen to your Uber account today. See app for details.
Bye, Mom.
Hello, and welcome to Scare You to Sleep. I'm your host, Shelby Novak, and I'm here to read you a couple of bedtime stories. Our first story this evening is a way to welcome you to the upcoming fall season. This is by author Mac Ralston. This is Evergreens in an Endless Autumn. Six months had passed since the cool winds of September raked through the brittle grass of Valley Glean like fingers in an old woolen blanket. Yet the fall has not since ended. That same cool breeze, as sharp and as bitter as a dagger at midnight, still cuts through the piles of shriveled brown bodies that line the streets, and the deep blue hue of the sky has saturated to a shade beyond what any of us could have ever dared to comprehend. It is an eternal blue. The fall started just as most often do, after a hot, wet summer that crescendoed into a clangy, thunderous lightning storm. Mama and I were out rocking on the porch step. We had exhausted the day, plucking our small orchard nearly bare of fresh apples, when the air began to taste of oncoming rain, and the song of the cicadas swiftly stopped like a spinning record without a needle. We watched and waited until the pitter-patter on the tin roof began, and then the crack of God's whip licked the sky with a scab of light, and down came the rest of the water. It was a heavy rain, heavier than any other that day. Yet from where we were perched, Mama and I were dry as bones. The cattle, however, were not as fortunate, and while the pigs might have had a field day in the fresh mud, all the other critters of the night were hunkered down as we were, including the chickens in their coop and the dog from the front yard. Old Betsy had found her way under Mama's chair after I had spoiled her with the rest of my half-chewed Honeycrisp, and continued in that position until we called it a night. Thus ended the last day of summer. When we awoke the following morning, a fresh September morning, neither Mama nor myself expected the harsh transition into the fall equinox that awaited us outside. The sky was now a bright, cheery blue. Every drop of rain 6 feet under the dew-covered browning grass, and the trees radiated the same yellow as the sunlight, spun with hints of red like gala apples. We moseyed on down the steps and into the yard, taking Betsy with us, and there wasn't a trace of humidity in the air to be found. It was a crisp air, nearly as crinkled as the leaves beneath our boots, and as cool and nippy as we had hoped for after the dog days had ended. The dog, and other animals, felt the same. Old Betsy was frolicking. The cows were grazing what little green grass remained, and the chickens were out of their coop. The mud had dried, but that didn't stop the pigs from their play. Scattered across our land, and all throughout Valley Glen, were the shed leaves of maple and ash, same as the ones that snapped as we strutted. The children kicked them down empty blocks and rode them to school as passengers in their spokes. Despite the breeze that stung like a bumblebee, there was a certain warmth throughout our little town, and as soon as I had bundled myself in that gifted jacket from Mama that hung in the closet since Christmas past, I could feel it too. Thus ended the first day of autumn. The sight that beheld us the following morning was nothing shy of disorienting. In fact, I had mistakenly assumed myself to be drunk on rum when I had first noticed the color coming through the window blinds. A blue, nearly purple shade that stretched across the room like a rug. I had hopped from my slumber in thinking I had slept well past the morning dew, but the still clicking clock swore to me that it was only 6:15. Peering through the window only furthered my suspicions. The sky was a near black, and the rising sun appeared to be setting already. The shrubbery along the windowsill was also alarming, nearly kissed brown with splotches of bare branches. The entire landscape looked as if God had laden his brush heavy with the idyllic colors of an autumn twilight. Only the day had just begun. Thus, in the same way it had started, ended the second day of autumn. On the third day, just as all the days since, the darkness of night was broken by the unrelenting gaze of blue that swept throughout our land, only day by day increasing in its saturation. It is as if a sponge had been left to soak in a bucket of paint, and day by day, what little hint of orange or yellow remained in that sky slowly rots into blackish blue. It is not only the sky that rots, however, but the trees, the grasses, and the rest of summer's flora. In their places, laced across the front and backyards alike, wrap the gangling vines of gourds and pumpkins that grow far beyond what God himself had intended. One such, a great squash of the Connecticut fields, had, by that point, eclipsed the tire of my '68 Chevy like it were the moon. It has since engulfed it. That afternoon, as the last of summer's warm breezes clashed against the howling winds of autumn's birthing pains, there was a great storm that rattled the house and shook the trees, dumping a great many leaves into the yard and scattering them about. The continued gusts of cold air struck the windows and rolled some of the gourds down the hills like oblong bowling balls, and the surges of power they caused by snapped power lines throughout Valley Glen rendered my CPAP breathing machine useless, and I dared not sleep that night without it. Thus ended the third day of autumn. The morning that followed, I had awoken with a strain in my eyes. Though the blinds were all closed and the doors all shut, the house was bathed in the vivid hue of a vibrant blue and the cold nip of the outside air. I checked the thermostat. It was nearly 40 degrees. In a place like Valley Glen, a temperature that chilly was only seen around Christmas time, never that early in the year. My wife had felt it too. She had awoken with a cough, a cold, and I fared my best to remedy her symptoms with a piping warm mug of coffee, drizzled with the honey from the comb. She thanked me and sat before the foggy window, bundled in a blanket, until calling me over to make note of the outstretched vines that had traveled down the lonesome road toward Valley Glen Square. The gourds were now the size of terracotta clay jars, and the pumpkins were as wide as hay bales. Bent over them like crooked, jagged guardian angels were the barren trees that had spread their leaves far and wide, so far and wide that not even a blade of browning grass saw the sun. And that yellow specter, too, despite having only just arisen, reared his glistening head for what seemed to be only moments, before ducking behind the horizon again and shading the land in pitch black darkness. Thus ended the fourth short day of autumn. The fifth began as the fourth had, with the sheer sheen of the cloudless autumn sky and the raspy coughing of my wife beside me. She had been gasping for breath all night, and when we had both finally tuckered out from restlessness, it seemed that rest was only a short reprieve. When we both had awoken to the brightness through the window blinds, I had wrongly assumed her complexion to be the result of the strange colors that emitted from outside. I was wrong. Her skin was now the shade of a duckling, as if she were ill from jaundice, and her sunken eyes were the deeper, richer tint of the same color, nearly orange. Her hair was falling out in clumps, and she had lost a tooth in the night. She gripped me with one hand, coughed into her other, and, as it trembled, extended the sprinkled red along her yellowed fingers to my eyes. I had called Dr. Sampson not 5 minutes later, after bringing poor Mama a glass of cold water, nearly frozen despite being left on the kitchen counter the night before. Dr. Sampson answered abruptly, as if expected, and informed me of her symptoms before I even uttered a word. My wife, it seems, was not alone to suffer her illness in Valley Glen. However, just as for the others, not much was there to change but to let whatever it was simply run its course. For the remainder of the day, Mama sat silently, except for the whimpers of Betsy beneath her rocker, and watched as the foul, deep blue of the empty air, void of any fowl that must have migrated south prematurely, seeped into every corner of the sky above, and the orange and brown crept across the ground below. The only hint of greenery to be seen were those few select trees that, for whatever God's reasons, never seemed to shed their leaves. The evergreens. It was that, ever so green, that was a comfort in some strange way to the both of us, though the companionship of that tinge was only short-lived. Before long, the screeching sunset, even earlier on arrival than the day before, burned every color of the earth and deep blue sky above into a molten shade of orange. like a Currier and Ives print if the colors began to bleed out onto the floor. Thus ended the 5th day of autumn. There was a great squealing that had awoken me from my slumber the morning of the 6th day, and immediately I had clutched the cold hand of Mama to make sure she was all right. It wasn't her. The screaming instead had come from outside, beyond the windows of which rich blue light seemed to ooze into our farmhouse. I had taken my coat from the rack and made it a step down the creaking porch steps when my slippers slipped into a thick bundling of dried-out leaves, a pile of crackling orange and brown whose colors were far deeper than my foot. I lifted my shoe from its depths, but as I surveyed the rest of the yard, I realized rather quickly that there was no alternate footing. The entirety of our land was coated in fallen leaves, a layer of rustling litter, at least a foot deep. Then, the squealing came again, this time louder and seemingly closer. I trudged through the browning leaves in my pajamas and jacket until I reached the splintering fence, which, beyond it, held in the likes of those chickens in their coop, and the cattle and the pigs. No such creatures stirred anymore. Instead, the wailing of the hog which had woken me came from beneath a dense pile of leaves, and I brushed them aside to see Clarabelle, our potbelly, sputter a gurgle of blood and fall limp against the dead grass beneath her. There was fungus and a great many toadstools protruding from her skin, and all around her, along the patch of earth, were budding mushrooms that stuck out from between mounds of leaves, and the carcasses of the cattle who had grazed the grasses bare. Clarabelle was always Mama's pig, and I had taken the bell around her neck with me as I plodded back up to our home, reverently holding it in my shivering hands and wondering how to break the news to my wife that all the livestock, including her prized pig, were now dead. But there were bigger problems inside. Mama was sitting at the table, the steam from a piping cup of joe rising from her grip. She turned to me with a faded, cracked smile, and I stopped cold in my tracks. My wife was orange, and the thin skin that surrounded her beady, sunken eyes was a sickly brown. They were the same saturated tones as the leaves that fluttered across the lawn. Immediately, I tried to hoist her to her feet, but her weight nearly snapped between my arms. She fell back into the seat with another tired cough and shook her head a silent no. I clutched her cold hands in mine, still holding the bell. She took in a breath, which was increasingly harder to do as the fall continued, and gazed up at me tearfully, her lips cracking audibly. I began to weep as she fell into herself. Thus ended the 6th day of autumn. I failed to rest all night, merely sat up in bed and watched as the blackness brightened into blue outside, but was awoken from whatever stupor may have clutched me by the hideous odor that penetrated my nostrils. The air was thin enough already, but when the stretch had seized me, I gasped and burst into a fit of coughing and nearly vomited out onto the floor. I grabbed the nearby CPAP machine resting beside the bed and pressed it to my lips as if it were a gas mask from the Great War, and huffed and puffed. I could, for once in many days, breathe again. Downstairs, my wife, or rather, the husk that my now dearly departed had left behind was rotten, withered, in that chair in the kitchen. Old Betsy had smelled her too. Only the soft white fur from her coat was now the shade of cinnamon as she whined at Mama's shriveled feet. The mug of coffee was still placed beside her on the table, frozen over as the temperature only grew chiller, and I reached out to touch her brown skin. Her fingers snapped upon the lightest brush of my hand and crumpled to the floor. I gagged into my mask and ran for the other side of the room, where the only comfort to be found was the basket of apples that never made their way into one of Mama's pies. They were all a putrid brown and writhing with worms. That afternoon I had called Dr. Sampson again after covering all the doors and windows wherever that blue light leaked through. It now hurt to stare at for long periods, and the mere color dug into my jaw and rang the drums of the ears. When the doctor finally did answer, he sounded both excitable and terrified all in the same breath. He begged of me not to go outside, not to dare smell it, and I questioned him why, but he never gave me a cohesive answer. He rambled on about leaves and lungs, the mutual exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, and how the earth itself was shedding. I then asked of him why then. Both of us were still breathing, what little air we had. But he didn't know. I did, however. We were the Evergreens. Unfortunately for old Betsy, though, she was not. Before the day was through, that cinnamon-covered fur had completely fallen off, like needles from a larch, leaving behind only the wrinkly skin of a now balding bitch, until at last gasp, that had fallen off too. Thus ended the first week of autumn. Before long, despite how grueling it might have seemed, that week became weeks. Halloween came and went, the most frightening of them all by mere virtue of the season. And then those weeks became months. 6 terrible months, so much as we can tell. Those of us who dared to step outside, perhaps with no alternative, our eyes covered and bodies wrapped in what warmth we had, took to throwing as many bodies as we could manage into the warming bonfires that crackle now day and night along the hills, to rid Valley Glen of the smell that keeps many of us awake. The ones that remain, left on curbs of which children no longer walk nor ride their bicycles, merely seep back into the earth and keep the corn stalks and the gourds and pumpkins ever growing, their scent so potent that a whiff of the wind tastes of one's mama's pies and goads me to gag and cry every time. Every autumnal meal, the same squash day in and day out, elicits the same reaction. Everything outside our windows remains frozen in place, just as the fall has been. And we often collectively contemplate whether or not the strange season of the valley lingers beyond its borders, especially where it is not yet autumn. The clocks, however, have lost all purpose of their ticking, and therefore we cannot tell with any certainty whether or not we have even reached the winter months as we suspect. All we know is that the days grow ever shorter, some seemingly less than mere hours. What used to be hours. Father Briggs now raves on at the pulpit, foaming at the lip about the end of days we have found ourselves in. He swears that death's harvest will be plentiful, and that perchance the colors of hell have fallen onto earth in shades of fire and brimstone. It It seems that even Dr. Sampson believes his rantings. We pray daily that the warmth of a radiant spring will thaw the once lively town of Valley Glen and end this endless fall. I only fear, if an impending spring buds, what fauna and flora lie in the wake of autumn and winter's chill back to life. Perhaps this eternal autumn is sparing us from whomever else may spring along with it.
What's new from Apple? There's the new iPhone 16 Pro, built for Apple Intelligence. And it comes with the all-new camera control, giving you an easier way to quickly access your camera tools. The new Apple Watch Series 10 has our biggest display and our thinnest design ever. And this? It's the sound of active noise cancellation, now available on one of 2 new AirPods 4 models. So quiet. Check out all of the new products and new features at apple.com. You can even buy yourself something new. See apple.com for product availability updates. Apple Intelligence coming this fall.
This episode is brought to you by Coffee Mate. Coffee Mate is the world's biggest coffee lover because we love all the ways you enjoy. Wait. Coffee Mate can't love coffee more than me. I'm a foodie. I went to Kyoto just for a nitro matcha latte. What? Oh, I have to finish the ad. Coffee Mate, for the love of coffee.
If your business is growing, it can be hard to keep up with delivery. That's why Uber Direct makes it simple. You take the orders through your app or site, but they help deliver them. It's a much simpler way to handle local delivery than, say, the Sub-Sandwich Submarine.
Sub-Sandwich for Samantha? Let's go! Oh, man.
Yeah, better to stay dry and stick with Uber Direct. You take the orders, we help deliver them. Delivery, done. Visit uberdirect.com to learn more.
And our last story of the evening is by author Matthew N. Clarke. This is It's Here. My wife shakes me so hard I wake up with a sharp grunt. She's sitting bolt upright in bed. I turn my head towards her. My eyes wrinkle from sleep and confusion. Her eyes are unblinking, terrified and transfixed on something at the foot of our bed. I sit up, rubbing my eyes as they adjust to the morning light. The white curtains ripple gently with a slight breeze, hiding the promise of a beautiful summer's day. Then, I see the thing at the foot of our bed. My wife and I remain frozen. At first, I'm paralyzed. Quickly, my fear turns to anger. I grab my sheets and motion to get out of bed. Suddenly, I'm frozen solid by fear again as I take a closer look at the thing. The figure is tall, lean, and lanky. It has the proportions of a large simian. Its long arms stretch all the way to the ground, and its hands lie limply on the wooden floor. Each hand ends in 5 deadly claws with wicked, sharp points. The thing is black as pitch, and I can't tell if it has dark, burnt skin or if it's made from a wholly otherworldly substance. Its mouth is large and stretched into a horrific grin. Its jagged teeth are unnaturally white. Its ears taper off into subtle points like that of an elf, and it has long, straggly black hair that has clumped and caked together by some brown material I do not wish to think about. My brain is confused by this impossible sight, and my mind goes blank. I thought it has to be a joke, but I can smell the thing. It has a smell that could not be produced by anything living, anything natural. I'm so utterly confused still. Something like this cannot exist. How is it here on some random summer's morning, standing here in plain daylight? These kinds of things only happen at night. There have been no other signs. No strange, unexplained moving of objects, strange sounds, eerie smells, and cold patches. We have not read from any weird books, played with Ouija boards, or been cursed. But there it stands, grinning at us, not moving a limb. I suddenly notice the silence. It is so eerily quiet right now. But how? Nearly every day this summer, the neighbors were either cutting down trees or letting their dogs and children run about and scream and bark and play, much to my chagrin. Yet now, the air is thick with silence. Where are the neighbors? In fact, where are the birds? There were always birds chirping loudly outside at this time. Has something happened to them? Sweat pours down my forehead. The thing is standing so still, so silent. I hear my heart pounding and my breathing becomes quick and shallow. Whatever this thing is, it's simply not possible. I begin to shake. I move my hand towards my wife slowly. I do not break my gaze on the thing. I stare at its eyes. They are large, white, and milky. Dead. My breath comes out hard and fast. As I grab my wife, she jumps slightly but does not turn her head away from the thing. Her face is twisted with terror, and her face is pale as snow. She trembles as she squeezes my hand so tight it goes numb and my fingers turn white. All I think about is getting away from this thing. I start to whisper to my wife when the thing slowly raises a long, thin claw to its mouth. Its lips purse as a noise that does not belong to our world hisses out. Its voice sounds slippery, slimy, squelchy. It sounds like something as it's swallowed by a peat bog. I freeze. My heart freezes, my blood freezes. My wife is clenching so tight my hand feels like it's being crushed. I tug at her chin and gesture for her to follow me. Slowly and silently, eyes glued on the thing, we step out of bed. As we do, I grab my keys from the bedside table. I then notice my wife and I are still in our summer pajamas. Strangely, with stress pressing on my mind from all sides, I am suddenly more worried about being found dead in my Spider-Man pajamas than anything else. I chuckle quietly and hysterically at this random and inappropriate thought as we run barefoot from our bedroom. It's in the corridor. Shit, it's in the corridor now. It didn't make a sound. I turn back to the bedroom. It's gone. It is moved without walking or scuttling or running. It can just travel from place to place without needing to move. Does that mean there's just one of them? My heart is beating so fast I feel dizzy. It stands at the entrance to the bathroom, just to our right, as we exit the bedroom. The curtains undulate gently as a summer breeze blows through the open bathroom window. The smell carried by this zephyr nearly burns off my nose. It is so wretched. The grip I had on my wife is now more desperate. There's no avoiding it. We have to run right by this thing to get to the front door. My stomach drops and my vision swims from fright. We run past it. The smell gets so much worse. It reaches out its clawed hand and caresses my face softly as we bound down the hall. My wife and I fight back tears. My mind is in tatters. All I can see now is the front door. I rip it open and tear through the door, wife in hand, into the warm morning air. We don't close or lock the door. The air is humid and sticky. It's hard to breathe. My chest is burning as we sprint to our little green car and leap inside. It's in the driveway. It's in the driveway. How could this be possible? What the hell is this thing standing, grinning in the blaring morning sun? I start the car as my wife and I buckle our seatbelts. The thing just stands as still as before, smiling that disturbing smile. My eyes pour out tears from pure stress and fear. I'm sobbing and my wife is near catatonic. I slam my foot on the accelerator and we take off straight for the thing. It jumps nimbly to one side, grinning like the Cheshire Cat and just as eerily graceful. As we reach the gate, I don't check for cars. I don't care. We live in a small mountain village and I take our chances. I swivel my head around to stare at the thing as it stands in the driveway, staring at us, unblinking, smiling. I stare at it, in turn, as I drive the car around the corner and watch the thing disappear as we move down the road. I continue to stare out the back window, so sure I will see it bounding after us, using its arms to run like a gorilla. But I see nothing. I turn my head slowly to face the front window. My heartbeat begins to ease. Momentarily, my wife and I are silent. But soon, we are screaming, tears flooding down our faces. My wife turns to me and cries out, "What the hell was that thing?" It suddenly smells horrible in the car. My blood ignites with fear. It's the thing's voice, coming from the seat behind my wife. We freeze and fall immediately silent. Fighting back our own whimpering slowly, we turn. It's in the car. It's on the back seat. It's in the car now. Suddenly, I hear a noise and turn back to face the road to see that I've crossed lanes completely. A small BMW heading straight for me. I yell and make a sharp turn back towards my lane, my heart in my throat. As we return to the correct side of the road, I see the thing reach out a hand to my wife. It slashes her just once, across her chest and neck. And it's so fast. I just see a blur and then blood, scarlet gore spurts from my wife in pressurized pulses. I watch her bleed and gurgle. She grabs my hand, and it quickly goes limp.
I told you to...
says the thing. That voice, so beyond natural, it sounds like a swamp trying to speak. I am dead and numb. I cry out in terror and anguish. Anger, spite, and vengeance quickly explode to life in my brain, vaporizing all traces of fear. I veer the car towards a cliff. We fly off of it and into a precipice. The thing just grins as we fall. The cops don't believe me. I have survived the crash. My wife is dead. And they think it was me somehow. I lie and tell them a wild animal got in the car, killed my wife, and forced me off the road. They shake their heads. Suddenly, there's a bang. A car outside the hospital has backfired. Momentarily, the cops and nurses are distracted. I steal a scalpel quickly and hide it under my mattress. It's nighttime now. I am alone. I can see it outside the hospital. It stands and grins up at me. I clench the scalpel in my bandaged, shaking hand. I lie in bed and I hold my breath. It's in my room now. It's here. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to my authors this evening, Mac Ralston and Matthew N. Clarke. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode as much as I did. If you'd like to follow the show on social media, you can do so on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook at scareyoutosleep. If you'd like to follow me personally, you can follow me at Shelby B. Novak on Twitter and Instagram. And if you'd like more, if you'd like your story considered for the show, please send it to scareyoutosleep@gmail.com. Please let me know in the subject line if it is a true story or a fictional story. And also, if it is a fictional story, please submit it with an attached document, not just in the body of the email. That would be really helpful. Thank you so much. And a quick reminder, the kids' stories are due by September 30th. You still have plenty of time, but I just wanted to let you know I got in a slew of them this past weekend. I feel like now that school's back in season, or in session, that it's easier to do the kids' stories on the weekend, so that's totally fine. So yeah, just you have until September 30th for those kids' stories. Also, I will be at Creep IE-Con in Ontario, California, the weekend of September 21st, and I will be manning the Bloody Disgusting booth, as well as hosting a panel. Again, this it seems like some things are kind of up in the air, but as of right now, I will be hosting a panel with Billy Zane. And yes, the Billy Zane. I'm very, very excited about it. Again, it seems like things are still moving around, so maybe if you get there and the panels are different or the schedule is weird, I apologize. I have nothing to do with the behind the scenes. I'm just going where I'm told. And part of that is going to be at the Bloody Disgusting booth. So if you'd like to see me there, or look for the Billy Zane panel on the schedule when it comes out, and I will be there as well. And I'm happy to talk and take pictures and hug and all that good stuff. I'm happy to chat if I can, unless I'm running to something, you know. But yeah, come visit me. If you see me at the booth, I'm probably more able to just sit and chat, or if I'm just wandering around the con, which I'm definitely going to do. I'm very excited to just wander around. I love walking around conventions. There's always so much cool stuff and people and costumes and just things to see. It'll also be my birthday, Yes, Stephen King and I have the same birthday. I've mentioned that 5 billion times, but it's one of my funnest facts about myself. Is that kind of sad that one of my funnest facts about myself is kind of has to do with just clout from someone else? Probably. Anyway, still, September 21st, it'll be my birthday. So, yeah, I'm very excited to have something to do to be out of the house for my first singular birthday. And speaking of birthdays, which led my brain to cake, which led my brain to cookies made out of cake. Let's talk about baking this week. I actually haven't done it yet. I need to do it tonight. Tomorrow I'm going to see some friends, and I was going to bring some cookies because we're going to be playing. It's Monster of the Week. It's not D&D, but it's like in the same realm. So we're playing Monster of the Week, and I'm going to bring some cookies. And one of my favorite cookies to bring to events is actually kind of, I guess, a cheater cookie, I guess you could call it. It's not really a cheater though. It's pretty, like, it's involved. But you take a box of cake mix and you mix it with, it's pretty simple, but now I haven't made them in a while. It's like a box of cake mix, a brick of cream cheese, a stick of butter, an egg. I think that's like all that's in it. And you make a dough. You let the dough chill for quite a while, and you roll them in powdered sugar, and they make these crinkle cookies. You can use whatever box cake mix you want. I always do devil's food just because that tends to be what every time I make them, and I make the devil's food ones, they're like gone. And they make a lot of cookies. People love these. They're one of those that you can just sit and eat and eat and eat. And so that's what my baking is going to be this week, is making those to bring to this get together tomorrow. By the way, I don't know if any of you will get this, but if you do, you'll hopefully think this is funny. The world that our dungeon, it's not a dungeon master because it's not D&D technically, but our master has created is actually set in the world of like cartoons. And so my character's name is Raina Harryhausen. Do you get it? It's set in the world of like animation, and it's also set in 1965. And my name is Raina Harryhausen. Anyway, someone thought that was cute. I did. That's why I chose it. And everyone I was playing with luckily got my reference, and they thought it was funny. Okay, I'm not going to chatter on for too long. I've got cookies to make. I think that's all the housekeeping. Oh, join the Patreon. Patreon.com/scareyoutosleep for ad-free episodes if you like, for $1 a month. Or for $3 and up, you get bonus episodes. And I am working on that first Dorian Gray episode, which is, oh boy, I'm really excited. I'm really glad that all the patrons picked Dorian Gray for the next classic full novel I'm doing. And for those of you listening on the main feed, I will release the first chapter on the main feed. And then you'll have to get the rest on Patreon, but you'll at least be able to check it out to see if it's something that you might be interested in joining Patreon for. So, all right, I'm going to skedaddle. I hope you're all having a fabulous week. I hope you're getting all your Halloween decorations and you're in a real spooky mood. For me, it's kind of Halloween all year round, but I know some of you, it's your time to shine, especially if you have like a yard. Oh, I miss having a yard. I miss being able to decorate a yard for Halloween. That is so much. And I love seeing all the little trick-or-treaters. Oh, love it. Great time of year. Great time. So I hope you're all enjoying all of your Halloween doings and things. I guess it's still early September, but I've just noticed a lot of Halloween stuff is already starting, events and things. So yeah, get your Halloween on, everybody. All right, I'm going to go. Please drink your water. Please drink your water. Please. Did you all stretch when I asked you to the other week? Did you? If you didn't, that's fine. I'm not going to, again, I'm not your dad. I'm not going to yell at you, but just reminding you, stretching feels awesome. Also, drinking water is good for you. And I love you, and I want you to be the best you. And that means taking care of yourself. You deserve it. There are days where you feel like you don't. And I've had many of those days where you're like, I don't deserve anything. I don't deserve to even take care of myself. And I understand that. And if you're going through that, I am so sorry. But just know that I think you're worth it. So just drink a glass of water, just for me, Please? Please? All right, go get some sleep. Sweet dreams.